The United States don't give a damn about means and ends. I mean, the means are ends and vice versa. It's a big problem for people who come from a different philosophical concept. I think one of the problems in America is what they call it being pragmatic, is that here they justify anything when it's convenient, and because there are no principles. And on the other hand, it's good not to have absolute principle, because that leads to other consequences. So I don't want to go into that thing, you know, but that's what I was reflecting, you know, my fear of this confusion of use of means and ends, that some people still make distinction in America, others don't. I would say the CIA is totally in confusing. The means are used for ends. You know. The end justifies the means.
Эти американские папиросы, они очень хорошие.
Speak English, comrade. Remember, that is about the only freedom you do not have in this town. This American town.
Americans, they have too many freedoms.
That is another thing you must remember, comrade. For one day it will be your mission to destroy those bourgeois capitalist freedoms.
Good evening, friends, visitors, Bostonians, Democrats, communists, revolutionaries, all those who struggle for peace and justice and a better world. Welcome to this historic conference.
I'm proud to say I'm still an anti-communist.
In the year 1948, a series of pamphlets were distributed by the House Committee on Un-American Activities entitled 100 Things You Should Know About Communism. I came across this in my files. I keep files on them. It's only fair. I was impressed by the thought that the committee knew 100 things about communism. When the pamphlets had 100 questions and answers. Question 1, what is communism? So the idea is to start with something easy, something that requires a brief answer. Answer, a system by which one small group seeks to rule the world. The answer was probably drawn up by the people who later founded the Trilateral Commission.
My name is Hannah Schramm. I'm a student at Edmonds Middle School, and I'm in the 6th grade.
The action on TV MASH takes place on
what is communism?
I have no idea.
Can I skip to question 76? Where can a communist be found in everyday life? Well, this question particularly interested me because there had been times when I was in need of a communist. I didn't know where to find one. Answer. Look for him in your school, your labor union, your church, or your civic club.
Making her home in Oakland, California, please welcome the author of Women, Culture, and Politics, Ms. Angela Davis.
Maybe I don't understand what a communist is. Yeah. I've just been taught to hate the word. Mm-hmm. What does that mean?
Well, a communist is someone who wants a society that's free of the injustices like racism and like the treatment of working class people. Mm-hmm. Personally, I would like to see a United States of America where everyone has the right to a job, where everyone has the constitutional right to a job. Mm-hmm. That would be, thank you. Healthcare should be an absolute human right. Mm-hmm.
Question 86. Is the YMCA a communist target? This really worried me. I always wondered why there was so much chlorine in the YMCA. Answer, yes. So is the YWCA.
It's a loaded word because you can't talk about it without thinking about it historically, and it begins really thousands of years ago with an idea that people could live communally and share the goods of this earth. And so what it's come to mean at different times, at different historical times, is perhaps something else. But that really is its first meaning for me.
Comrade Donovan, you're accused of the following crimes against the state: subversion, deviationism, and treason. You've been given this opportunity to make a public confession of your treacherous violation.
Just a minute. This is supposed to be a trial. Who says I'm guilty of anything? Where's your proof?
Have you ever read Karl Marx? What do you think of Henry Wallace's Third Party movement? Have you ever had Negroes in your home? There is a suspicion in the record that you are in sympathy with the underprivileged. Is this true?
To advocate equality between human beings in South Africa is a communist act that requires to be suppressed. No wonder the people of South Africa, for instance, feel that if, for instance, Botha is an anti-communist, Margaret Thatcher is an anti-communist, and Reagan is an anti-communist, that communism must stand for something that is worth fighting for.
For anti-communists come in all sizes. There are violent reactionary anti-communists like Oliver North, and nice guy liberal anti-communists like Hubert Humphrey. There are gentleman anti-communists from Yale like George Bush, Nazi anti-communists in exile from Eastern Europe like Bush's anti-Semitic Committee on Minorities that we were asked to forget so quickly about during the election, and redneck anti-communists from the deep woods like the Ku Klux Klan.
Anti-communism as ideology and practice fosters fear and hatred, which ultimately benefits only those whose power depends upon keeping us all down.
Our task is to understand that racism is used to fight communism and that anti-communism is used to fight the struggle against equality.
We then need an alternative critical perspective. Anti-communism, racism are the premises of ideological thought control which must be combated.
I'd like to say something initially. I think anti-communism's taken a terrible pasting at this conference. And I'd like to say a couple of its achievements, because they've been a bit not mentioned, really. And I might point out in this connection Sputnik, which led to a great leap forward in funding for higher education, and more recently Star Wars, where, you know, if you really want to study almost anything like the flight of the honeybee, as long as you say it's in connection with the Star Wars program, you'll get a wad of money from the Pentagon.
A conference like this makes you think about ways in which anti-communism has affected your own life.
I was called in and told that my commission was being held up because I was suspect in terms of patriotism.
I received a formal letter from the U.S. Public Health Services saying that I was found unfit to hold a commission in the U.S. Public Health Services. The reasons were secret, but that terminated our correspondence, and we could assume that we'd have little to say to each other again.
So I was fired from this incredibly stupid job.
Well, I was fired from my first teaching job because I was involved with the student movement in Atlanta.
The FBI then went to the administration, the dean in particular, and I was notified within 2 weeks of that FBI visit that because we were not cooperative with them, that I could not expect to return to Carleton.
1 year after I joined the Communist Party, this was in 1969, I was fired from my position in the Department of Philosophy at UCLA.
My father lost one job because of being a communist.
For us, it has not only been a matter of thought, since many of us served rather long prison terms for thinking so-called evil thoughts about socialism and communism.
The message came back to me through another person, an adult, that my husband and I couldn't possibly be communists because my daughter was the only one in the Brownie troupe who knew how to sing and knew the verses of the Star-Spangled Banner.
Hello. In the traditional motion picture story, the villains are usually defeated. The ending is a happy one. I can make no such promise for the picture you're about to watch. The story isn't over. You and the audience are part of the conflict. How we meet the communist challenge depends on you. What has happened so far, what is happening now, is far from encouraging.
The difference between a kind of reasonable criticism you could have of communism, socialism, of the Soviet Union, of governments, of states, whatever they call themselves, the difference between that kind of criticism or indignation and the kind of murderous, indiscriminate hatred which leads us to threaten to drop bombs, to kill all of the citizens of this country, presumably the citizens of governments, where the citizens themselves are victims, and we're prepared to kill all of them, presumably to save them, as we've always been ready to kill people to save them from communism.
In my own country, Grenada, when the indomitable leader Maurice Bishop and the courageous Grenadian people began a search for self-determination, using our indigenous cultural and ideological formation, very simply we called it participatory democracy, President Ronald Reagan assailed the Grenada Revolution, identifying it, in his words, a communist threat to U.S. national security.
The mightiest nation on the face of the earth, the best armed, the most affluent, attacks the smallest, poorest island in the Caribbean Sea. And the President of the United States gets up with that fatuous idiocy of his and says, "This is our proudest moment." And I said, "This is revolting." I said, "It does injury to my sense of who we are, what we're all about. It's an outrageous thing. Cousin Ed Snodgrass got me." Oh, he jumped. He said, "Johnny, you see, there you go. You don't know the facts. Ronnie knows the facts. He got his CIA, investigated all that, and give him the real facts on. He had to do that." When he said, "This is our proudest moment," what he is saying is that he saved the United States of America. That's what he was saying. Do you realize that they got a secret plan where that bunch of stinkpots was going to swing down into the Caribbean Sea, join them Nicaraguans, and pin us in between the Arctic Circle and the Gulf of Mexico?
To make the American free enterprise capitalist system into a world system, a global strategy, military, political, economic, diplomatic, and psychological, was devised. An iron ring of military bases was established under treaties for different regions of the world. The Rio Treaty for Latin America and the Caribbean, NATO for the North Atlantic, the Baghdad Pact, later called CENTO after the Iraq Revolution of 1958, that for the Middle East, Seattle, and the ANZUS Pact for the Far East. All this meant to contain communism, to roll back socialism, and arrest national liberation worldwide.
So this anti-communism virus, which of course has always been
present in our culture in an anti-socialist, anti-radical, it is almost the American religion, civic religion. But I think what I was saying and what Diana was saying, and really all of us, has been that it did take a new meaning with World War II when certain characteristics of Nazism were grafted on to our image of communism, and then we became like what we held to a considerable extent. That's where we are. Let me answer very finally in a way that I hadn't mentioned. I was just looking through some notes, and I noticed that I gave my wife, Patricia Ellsberg, some of you know, Ed Herman's book, The Real Terror Network, about the activities not just of the CIA, but ultimately of the IMF, an institution we dominate, and the world economic system, the banks and other things in Latin America and Central America, and the effect of that on quite specifically the methods of terrorism and death squads in Latin America. A quite stunning book, which I recommend to all of you. And she woke up the next morning, I remember next to me, crying and saying, "We are like the Nazis. We are acting like the Nazis." And I said to her, to my wife, I've known her for 24 years now, I said, you know, that's a secret that I've been holding to my heart for a long time, since I was in the Pentagon. I was 14 when the war ended, and I really didn't want to join an organization that was like the Nazis. And that's what I did join by mistake. And that didn't start with George Bush, and it's going to take more than one administration to end it, but that is our task.
Now, is it the communists they have been after? No. They are after anti-imperialists. Look at the history of interventions in the Third World. If you look at the history of interventions in the Third World, you will notice yourself that perhaps, with the exception of Vietnam and Cuba, every other intervention has occurred against not only non-communist, but actually anti-communist nationalist regimes. Iran, Guatemala, the Congo. I mean, these were actually non-communist patriots whose only fault was that they were supplying to third world nationalism an economic content. That is to say, we take control of our national resources. That was there. So in other words, anti-communism is not a serious matter. What it is, it's a sort of ideology of anti-imperialism, and those of us who are really anti-imperialists will have to face up to it. Bad times are again coming. And it's going to be more than the Palestinians who will be the victims of it, because it has been very easy for all of you to turn your eyes away from the Palestine question because it was an easy way out.
I began to ask myself at one point, why is it that social or popular revolution in an impoverished country is such a threat to the United States?
I remember the Sandinistas from school. I mean, they were full of ideas. They could write papers. They were using details. They didn't get any money, but they were people who had a lot of ideas in their head. I mean, a lot of ideas and paper writing and talking to people and grassroots everywhere, grassroots. And, okay. But the contras don't have anything. Do you have a political platform? Do you have a plan? Have you ever heard a contra leader talking about political education, about schools once they take over? Have you heard of a contra leader with an idea?
And we live in an era of political socialization where the country is facing and undergoing what seems to me to be nothing more, but also nothing less than intellectual suicide. You have people who cannot tell you where the Persian Gulf is, but they are in favor of sending troops to the Persian Gulf.
Anti-communism has also provided the ideological climate here at home in which scapegoating and targeting and repressing certain sectors of our population is not only possible but condoned by some of the U.S. public. And that purpose has served to divide and weaken particularly the internal opposition to those wars and that intervention abroad.
Many of us, in a single action or protest, have been labeled, have been hooted at in the streets and called bitch, whore, lessee, nigger, commie, just as commie and Jew were epithets hurled in unison against male and female radicals of earlier struggles.
What it meant to me as a person becoming active in the peace movement and Women's Strike for Peace, the loss of a knowledge of how you could connect feminism with the struggle for peace, the loss of knowledge of a whole bunch of gallant women who were both radicals. Some of them were communists, some of them were just liberals, who understood that all the social issues are connected with the issue of gender equality. So that was lost from historical memory. And the message that I want to bring at this point is that not only do we have to struggle now for the right to have alternative solutions to societal problems, but we have to reclaim our memory of radical organizations, of feminist organizations. It's really our duty, otherwise we start from nowhere.
I can tell you that as an American growing up here, I was very proud of the fact that my father, who could hardly speak English, had black friends, had Irish friends, we had people coming to our house, which was a Jewish ghetto, which meant that as a black man walked up to our house, everybody in the street would say, "There's a communist." Now, is that bad? I thought that was good. I still think it's good.
If you had to sum up what communism is all about, Chris, how would you sum it up?
Well, I just don't like it. That's it.
But what is it? Have you ever met a communist, Ann?
No. You know, what the communists don't believe in God?
I think that's what I learned, is that they are atheists. But I think...
That's what I heard. I don't know nothing about them.
Mm-hmm. My grandmother had a mink coat. When she died, my cousin gave the eulogy, and he talked about the contradictions, and he talked about her mink coat, and he said, it was sort of like bread and roses. I mean, everybody, you know what the revolution was about, or what all this, because I don't know if she really always believed there'd be a revolution, but maybe she did. That the revolution was really about, having antiques and diamond rings and mink coats for everybody. But
I remember this phrase, come the revolution, we'll all eat strawberries. But I don't like strawberries. Come the revolution, you'll eat strawberries.
When I think about communism, I think about the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. That communism is basically the ultimate democracy. It's a society, I imagine a society in which everybody is concerned with the common good and willing to work towards the common good. Native American communities were often communist in that they were small and a lot of people had input into how the tribe operated and what decisions were made.
It's everybody working and then putting their wages in a big pool and dishing out what everybody produces equally to all the people, as opposed to America where everybody just is out to make as much as they can. And if you make more than the other guy, then that means you're doing well. Whereas in communism, if you put it all more into the pot to help everyone else, then you're doing good for all your comrades, stuff like that.
I don't know. So I think that a lot of reasons why everybody's so angry is just out of ignorance. I personally think it's like a utopian thing. It just doesn't work,
Radicals in American history, and by radicals I mean, they've been communists, they've been socialists, they've been anarchists, they've been all sorts of people who want things changed, who've been indignant at the way things are going. And these radicals, these anarchists, these socialists, these communists, without them, we would not have had the kind of changes that took place in this country, which were good changes. Because very often these people, these agitators, these radicals, they were the ones who were needed to start things off.
So I think it's important to explore the potential sources of power we hold within our hands, especially now during this period when it is so important to create united fronts against the official oppressions that are represented by those in power.
There's a strong suggestion here that people talk to their children and their extended families about what went on here.
because lots of kids don't know what parents or grandparents or uncles or aunts went through in terms of experiencing anti-communism. Along with that, we need more people. We need to support more people to come out from the old left and tell their stories of experiences of oppression via anti-communism. If you want media about this, what was suggested is giving talks, leading classes, and doing this kind of work in YMCAs, in union halls, and vets organizations, at schools, at churches and synagogues.
For the young people, it was really empowering to be here and see the sense of an understandable history and tradition that exists in the left that we just read about and we see in very small numbers on professors at our campuses and things like that, in classes.
Finally, that we are concerned that we not fall vulnerable to a potential trap of all folding under the umbrella of anti-communism. That it's important to be anti-communist, but not in a way that we lose sight of our diversity and our differences and what makes us an integrated movement and our whole movement.